Hello.
Good afternoon. This is the Open Relationship Academy Master Class. I think we're in week 4. Trying to keep track. It's going to get to a point where I won't remember, but in week 1, help me with this, we did the 5 big questions of open relating. In week 2, Leah did a demonstration of what we learned at S.P.A.R.C, emotional and release techniques. Last week, we all had a long conversation about open relating, and this week is a bit of a continuation of that, but really a focus on trying to bring in some tools. So the goal is to cover S.P.A.R.C, which is our blueprint for conscious communication and shifting conflict into peace. And what we wanted to do was kind of continue the conversation about Hannah and Jason and how they've had a bit of a, I don't want to call it a conflict, but it is a bit of a conflict of needs. And just they've been honoring this conflict and working with it and talking through it. And what we want to do is kind of just go through an exercise of just gathering as much intelligence as we can, understanding what's at play, and then doing a bit of a demonstration of how to use S.P.A.R.C, how to set the stage, how to probe, how to acknowledge, how to reframe, and then how to collaborate with our partners to get each other's needs met. So I think that the first step is just kind of teasing out a little bit of like what is going on, what is the dynamic, the specific dynamic we want to cover today. Then perhaps what I can do is go over the parts of S.P.A.R.C, and then we can do a demonstration.
Okay.
All right. So let's start with you guys. High level, it's just to jump in. It's you guys have been together for a few years now, and
2-ish.
2 years. Okay. Hannah has experience in open relationships from the past. Jason does not. Both are interested, and they're coming at it from 2 different perspectives, 2 different experiences or lack of experience. So, Hannah, why don't you start and tell us a little bit more? Just kind of give us a little bit more detail.
So talk a little bit more about my values and needs set or my history.
I think, yeah, let's go to present tense. Like, what are your values around open relating? How do you show up around it?
And what are you looking for?
What are you looking for, and how does that all kind of meet up or butt up against Jason's current needs and values?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So where I am currently is that I've done a lot of digging deep, get really clear about what my spectrum, what to me between a functional relationship and a fulfilling relationship. So I've gotten really clear about if I'm going to be operating in relationship in a fulfilling way, what my bare minimum needs are as far as how I function, especially in the context of this conversation, how I function and relate to the rest of the world. So what are my bare minimum needs for feeling fulfilled? And the good news about that is that my bare minimum needs are Jason, but really mostly from what I'm hearing from him. He's to me, I feel that same way. And his side, but so my bare minimum needs are really, really, really high value for community and community immersion, and that's where my is kind of that's where my openness reflects, because my nature and the way that I have friends and the way that I function in community is it's more on the unconventional side. It's very naturist, tantric, sensuality as a natural friendship way of being, like basic level, just low level sensuality, not sensuality that's centered around creating sexual stimulation, just being, cuddling, caressing, like kisses, just expression of life kind of way of operating. And so I have a desire to feel in full acceptance of that aspect of myself and those values I recognize is my own internal journey. Ultimately, I need to come into full acceptance and choose to honor those things. I have my own blocks and things like that. And then in relationship with Jason, I would love to experience that my experience of fulfillment and good vibes and good feelings is also a positive impact for him. It adds to his life and his sense of that's what I would really desire. That's where I am.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. You're so articulate and so clear. And to try and recap, because Leah, you and I are going to be marrying this and practicing this. What I'm hearing is that you have a place where your need for love, for significance, even safety in some ways, your need for variety and growth and service, and even some healing, lies in a strategy of having what some might call a monogamous way to show up in the world, where you're able to be with friends and be in community and maybe hug and hold those hugs and eye gaze and cuddle and express affection in what might seem like a romantic way to the outside world, but to you is just a very loving, communal way of being. And that in itself is a part that works for you, and allows you to have freedom and openness. And am I capturing all of that well?
Yes, very well. You even filled in some blanks that I'd forgotten to cover, because that is directly connected to my safety and security in the world. That kind of decentralized focus of belonging and interdependence. Yeah.
Okay. And did you want to ask me the question?
Well, yeah. So in hearing Hannah relay her desires and whatnot, Jason, I want to hear from you kind of the same thing, but also like, what are the elements of her desires that affect your desires or affect how you feel your needs are being met?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the first part is easy because I can basically say that I value and desire exactly the same thing. And to some degree, I've actually lived and operated in that field of expression, just not in the context of a committed partnership. I've been involved in communities where that was the norm, and I just happened to be single at the time. And so my bonding and attachment system, with a primary other was not involved and therefore stimulated. So I do very much value the same the same scenario, the same reality for basically the same set of reasons. And when that rubs up against me, it's I'm very clear of the fact that when it rubs up against me in an uncomfortable way, it is by virtue of that, I still have not completely, I've got a long way to go. I still have yet to shed the conditioning, the social and psychological, emotional conditioning that, that I've inherited from life and reality, around what partnership means, what, what commitment means, what inclusion versus exclusion, and in particular, minor point answer to that question is when I'm present to or aware of her having those experiences of sensuality and intimacy, combination of sensuality and emotional intimacy, it triggers my storybook, my pre-existing unconscious rule system that says that means that she's devoted to me. That means that she is now interested in that person instead of me. And I'm aware that that's not true. I'm consciously, deeply aware of the fact that that's not true. But my body mind, my unconscious self, is still experiencing it as a betrayal. So that arises in the form of, an intense emotional state within me. And I can even be well aware consciously that it's just a triggered state, but it's still difficult.
Gotcha. Sure. So what I'm hearing you say is that you've actually experienced that expansiveness in a community setting, but not where you were pair bonded necessarily.
Right.
You were single.
Exactly.
So what you're finding in this partnership is as that pair bonding has taken hold, perhaps some of those myths that the holdover from the conditioning of what it means when our partner desires other, even though cognitively you've been able to rationalize why that's not the case, but there's some disconnect between where you've been able to rationalize and where you've been able to help your body catch up to you and be on the same page in a way, especially considering you have the same desires.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Yeah.
sound right? Okay.
Awesome.
Right.
So
thank you
so much, both of you, so far. This has been really, really interesting to get to know you in this way. You make me want to itch his beard now.
Oh my
God. So I think a next step is, so high level, there's also a piece about beyond the discomfort that you already have in monogamous land, in these communal events. There's been some talk about here and there in the future escalating to actual physical, sexual, or erotic experiences. And it seems like going there when the monogamous bit is still work feels overwhelming. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would also add to that, I think that there's a level of awareness on conscious and unconscious levels that if we're operating in community with people and building intimate relationships, it kind of stands to reason that could very naturally develop into something that's edgier, more sexual,
Right. Yeah.
Difficult category for Jason. And
right.
So I imagine that might be the part of you feeling it being difficult for you to accept those lower levels of sensuality.
Yeah. And just to kind of put that into a nugget for myself, fitted in the past from having the presence of the whole agreement of exclusivity in this template that I totally took for granted. That's not there. It's like what I used to experience as some kind of boundary is no longer present. So the smallest things feel like they could be part of a slippery slope into something I'm not able to handle, basically.
Yeah, that's understandable. Safety net. I have one question. Have you, and this might be personal, but have you or been open to connecting with others in that realm together?
The imagination. We've had fun in imagination and fantasy land.
Okay.
That's been a really interesting experience.
Are you talking about the more explicit, like erotic place, or just the more sensual and inclusive place?
I guess maybe the more sexual, explicit place, since that seems to be the more challenging.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we haven't gone there, practically speaking.
So I have a question. I know we have a little bit of a delay here. So, Hannah, have you felt inside these community scenarios a connection with someone that you would have wanted to explore, but knew that you had to pull the reins back on yourself?
Yes. Yeah,
How did
definitely.
How did that feel for you?
Particular. Um, it was mixed feelings. There are a lot of parts of me that, were aware consciously that um, that if I can that kind of holding pattern, it's not actually fulfilling or healthy for me. So I'm aware that that's not sustainable. So I can feel, certain amounts of tension in knowing that. And I feel sadness and loss of the valued connection. Um, and I also feel a lot of peace and um, what is the determining factor for me and okay in that holding pattern is whether or not Jason is continuing to lean in to the best of his ability. And I really feel and know that he is. And I trust that he and I have the same core values and vision. So I can't help but to relate to that temporary feeling of loss as simply a step in the greater evolution of our relationship and our relationship. And so I'm not really seeing it as though I've lost anything permanently, because, there probably will come a time down the road where I'll be able to have more of a connection with that particular person where it'll feel more ecologically sound. And so it's kind of a hodgepodge of feelings.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Definitely the word ecology comes up a lot for us as we're making decisions. We always want to check in with what our decisions are going to do to the people that we love, and also to ourselves. Like, what are the outcomes on the entire ecology? And you guys have, this is what I love about what I call ethical non-monogamy, is that you're taking your time, you're slowing things down, you're honoring what is and working with it instead of moving too fast and creating a lot more conflict and pain than is necessary. So, all right. What I want to do is I want to just kind of touch on the basics of S.P.A.R.C, and then perhaps Leah and I can demonstrate it using this subject, and we're essentially going to role play you guys. We can think about it while I'm talking about S.P.A.R.C. If you guys can think about whether or not we should play the same masculine, feminine roles, or we should play the positions that we are already more in, meaning we both want openness. So, but I just feel like I relate more to Hannah, and you may relate more to Jason.
Well, I relate that I haven't had as much experience that I'm like.
Yeah. But that's not for lack of me wanting to support you or having a challenge. So it's up to you on it's up to you on who you want to role play. Just try to think about it while I cover S.P.A.R.C.
Okay.
So S.P.A.R.C basically is an acronym, right, for 5 parts. The first part is setting the stage. The second part is probing. The third part, A, is acknowledging. R stands for reframe, and C stands for collaborate. So in setting the stage, there's a few parts. The first is checking in with yourself. Interestingly enough, Jason has the methods of how to get with yourself, center yourself, do some breath work, do some other modalities that he's got, so setting the right mindset with yourself before you even bring up a conversation with your partner. You know the conflict is there, but you're getting yourself right before you go in. That's really, really important. Another part of setting the stage is choosing the time, the place, the atmosphere, right? So it's not ideal to have a conversation late at night when you're trying to fall asleep. It's not ideal first thing in the morning when everybody's rushed to start their day. It really does make sense to create a container that is not rushed, also free of distractions such as cell phones and other things that might come up. So pets, kids, cell phones, you name it. So being mindful of the actual atmosphere that you're creating to go into a session, if you will. Also, in regards to setting the stage, there's a part about setting intention and giving kind of like your partner and the relationship itself a reputation to live up to, right? That's straight out of Dale Carnegie. We want to say something to the effect of, if I'm going to sit down with Leah and go through stuff, I'd say, Leah, there's something coming up for me. And I know that pretty much every time we use conscious communication and we slow it down, we figure things out, right? We always do. So that literally just starts to diffuse the tension because now you're setting a really, really genuine intention. Genuine reputation for us to live up to before we go in. That's really useful. And also just as genuinely as possible, just statements of gratitude. Like, I'm so grateful that after 3.5 years of all the ups and downs that we've been through, you're the one that has stood by me. You're the one that hasn't ran off.
No.
And I'm just like,
No
really,
pressure.
and I'm really, really like deeply grateful for that. I'm really grateful. You make me feel safe because you're never a no. You're always a, how can I make this work? And I'm just deeply grateful for that. So those are just bits and pieces of how to set the stage. The last part of setting the stage is interesting because how are we coming into the conversation? How are we just bringing up the subject, whatever that subject is, I think is critical. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to weave in omen, observations, meanings, emotions, and needs. And through experiment, what I've realized is that if I bring in the meanings and I bring in the emotions, when I present the subject, I'm shooting myself in the foot. I'm putting in way too much that's unnecessary to kick things off. So for example, what I'd say is, I'm observing that you're in communication with somebody new. And
that's indisputable.
Right. An observation is a fact. There's no way, like, unless you're living on two different planets, it's a fact.
It can be as subtle as, I'm observing you're talking to someone a lot more than you talk to me.
That even be a meaning. That's a meaning.
But people conflate those all the time, that they think that they feel they're observing something. So it has to be as impartial and objective as possible.
Right. The challenge is to not throw in anything that feels like a judgment, a meaning, an opinion, just factual. Story. I'm observing that you're talking to somebody new, right? So I express my observation. Then what I do with the meaning is I create a statement or an affirmation, and I don't know what I don't know.
Can you give an example of the meaning you're creating so there's a distinction?
You're throwing me off. Oh. So the meaning could be, for example, I think that I'm going to lose my connection with you and we're going to end up breaking up because this guy is fucking awesome and I'm losing you. Like, that could be my meaning, right? But instead I'm going to say that I don't know what I don't know, so I'm not attaching myself to any meanings. I am feeling some discomfort, but I don't know if it belongs here. So I'm doing two things. I'm keeping her from being offended by anything or triggered by anything. And I'm also affirming to myself that I don't know what I don't know, so I'm not attaching myself to any meanings. I'm literally affirming it to myself and also mentioning that there's some discomfort, but leaving room for the idea that it may not belong here. This discomfort may not belong here, right? And then I mention my need. And in this case, just in setting the stage, I say, and my only need is a need for clarity. So what's coming up for you around this? Right? So now, I didn't really talk about anything specific. I try to stay with the facts. I handled the meaning with, I don't know what I don't know. I express some discomfort, but also honor the fact that it may not belong here. Maybe rooted elsewhere, maybe rooted in trauma, but it may not belong here in this case. And my only need right now is a need for clarity. So I'm curious if there's anything coming up for you around that. And since I'm the one holding the container, she would then start to speak. And as she speaks, it doesn't matter what comes out. That's when we move into kind of the probing and the acknowledging phase. They kind of like dance with each other. So she'll say something and I'll ask more curious questions. She'll say something and I'll ask more curious questions. And I literally will go back and forth, systematically trying to tease out her observations, her meanings, her emotions, and her needs, whatever those might be. And then what happens is after a little bit of time, I recognize that she's fully expressed, and I essentially piece together what she's seeing, thinking, feeling, and needing. Essentially her omen in all of this. Her observations, meanings, emotions, and needs. Now, if she's really good at it, she'll also not attach to meanings and emotions, but that's not realistic. She may have a bunch.
And I also don't have a need for clarity.
Right.
I might have a need for you to have clarity.
Right. She might just have a need for safety, for respect, for consideration, for serenity, for fairness, she can even say that she has a need to not have a double standard. It's not exactly a need, but it's a need to not have double standards, whatever the case may be. And then what happens is once she fully expresses and I sort out what her omen is, this is a phrase that I use to kick off the R, which is a reframe, right? I'll say something like, so Lea, I just want to make sure I got it all right. I kind of like summarize it. You're seeing that I'm reacting to you talking to somebody new. You think that XYZ, whatever her meaning is. You're feeling frustrated, and your need is for a shared reality.
Freedom.
Whatever it is. And do I have that? Do I have that close enough? And she would say yes. And then the next step is to really, really focus on the need, right? So I just want you to know that your need for us to have a shared reality and your need for freedom, those two needs are super legitimate needs. Your needs are my needs. I love you. And I want you to have your needs met. And there's something really magical that happens when we just focus on the needs and stay out of the weeds, right? Of the meanings and the emotions. And just acknowledge, because human needs are universal, right? We can't deny that we want our partner to have those needs. We might want to argue about meanings, but we can't argue with the fact that we want, especially if we're in love with someone, we want them to feel free and we want to have a shared reality with them. And then the next step is, I'd say, something along the lines of, I want us to just try, I want you to try and just take a moment and breathe into the possibility, just breathe into the possibility that we together can work to get those needs met, to get a shared reality and freedom. So let's just take a moment and breathe. And what usually happens in that moment, that specific moment, is a visceral change in the person's energy. Because now I've held their needs. Now I've kind of made a commitment to sort out how to get their needs met, which is important. And then, depending on the circumstance, and this is interesting because now you're at a crossroads, based on everything you've picked up, you may have to take some ownership that you have some work to do, and that's all there is to it. And that's when you build real relationship equity. And you say, so based on everything that we've just talked about, I have some work to do. I need to really focus on not doing X, Y, and Z because I feel that's my responsibility to do. And right there, you stop it, you build a ton of relationship equity, and you leave it there. Another option is, in that stage, is to say, wow, that was a lot of heavy shit. If I try to keep talking my way into reframing, it's not the right time. Let me allow my partner to hold that I see them and let it go for a night or two. Just let it be. Just let it be that they've been seen and held and that their needs are acknowledged and that I desire to help them have their needs met. And then the third option, depending on the circumstance, again, it's subjective, is to move forward with more inquiry. So I would say something like, are you open? Do you feel open to other observations and other possible meanings?
Yes, and that usually only happens if I hear certain magic words.
Oh, right. I forgot one line that Leah's recently added to our repertoire.
And there's a few variables on it, but
so when a little bit further behind, before I acknowledge her needs that she perceives are not being met, there's a piece about I can understand why you feel that way. I can see how you'd feel that way. Something as simple as that, apparently.
I get it.
Or I get it.
With you.
Right? Like, whether you get it or don't get it isn't really important. It's the fact that you're allowing them to not have shame around their needs.
The only thing there is, for me, women are pretty smart. Our antenna are up, and I feel we will know if someone's saying they get it, but they aren't.
Right.
So what I'm wondering is what you think about if you're not getting it, really not getting it, you continue that probing process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because eventually, we're not crazy. Like, we're not crazy people. I think eventually you'll get to a place of understanding, even if you don't agree.
Yeah, as you continue inquiry with probing and acknowledging, you'll end up with needs, at least needs, where you can see how the person, based on their observations, meanings, and emotions that may be rooted elsewhere, are causing their system to feel like their needs aren't being met.
Right.
You could be thinking, no, her needs are being met, but her experience is that her needs aren't getting met. And that's really what you want to acknowledge and say, I can see how you feel that way.
And that's when that open to reframe happens, when I really feel that you're seeing me. That's the definition of seeing a person to me.
Into me you see.
Yes, yeah.
Intimacy, exactly. Right? So that's key. So then what happens is we move on with other observations, other meanings, other possible things that might be missing. Now, normally what happens is, because nobody does this process ahead of time, they don't put in the work, the person that they're trying to talk to is highly triggered still. So they don't want to hear about other observations or other meanings. But because we've done all this work to probe and acknowledge, we've lowered so much resistance that the person is now much more open to hearing more. They're in a place where they can hear more. And then the rest of it is actually magic. The rest of it is amazing, where the two of us have collaborated to get both of our needs met so much easier. And that stuff is, it's going to be unique to each circumstance. It's not something that we can necessarily teach, but it just happens. It just happens like magic. The key is laying down the groundwork for that to happen, to create the container for that. Does that make sense? All right. So that was a thorough explanation of S.P.A.R.C. Just a quick recap for everybody. The first is to set the stage. And inside setting the stage is setting the stage with yourself, having the right atmosphere,
The right time.
It's the right time. It's the right place. No distractions. You want to make sure that you have a kind of like a statement of gratitude and also an affirmation that gives your relationship a reputation to live up to, right? And then you want to present the subject. As part of setting the stage, you're going to present the subject. But if you look at OMEN, you're going to focus on, hey, I'm seeing this. I don't know what I don't know. I have some discomfort, and I have a need for clarity, and then let them talk. And you hold the space. Once they start talking, you ask curious questions that allow you to extract their observations, meanings, emotions, and needs in whatever way they come out. And here's the hard part. You might hear things that are highly triggering. And the challenge there, like this is where the rubber meets the road, is to continue to hold that space and just listen and take in, not to respond. Because we all want to respond in the moment. If you just take it in, you mirror it back, you take it in, you mirror it back, and you stay calm. And then once you've gathered all of that, you go into a transitionary phase where you summarize their observations, meanings, emotions, and needs, their omen, and you tell them essentially, like Leah said, I can see how you feel that way. I can understand how you feel that your need is not being met, or you perceive that your need won't get met in the future. I can totally see that. And I want us to breathe into the possibility together that we're going to work and I'm going to work to have your needs met. And then we slow down, we essentially co-regulate each other that way. And then depending on the circumstance, there are 3 different paths. One is you take responsibility because you see factually there's something for you to do. So you take that responsibility, you make a commitment for change on your own, and you build relationship equity. Number 2 is you give it some space because it's a lot of heaviness and it needs to be held. Because if you try to reframe too soon, it'll look like you were just manipulating the other person and you had an agenda. But if it feels like the person is softened up, then you ask for consent to continue exploring other observations and other possible meanings. And then the magic just happens. The collaboration just starts to happen organically. So that's a quick recap of S.P.A.R.C. Nice. So we've been building on that for about 3.5 years, and our polyamorous world has been ripe with experiments.
Oh yeah.
All right, so let's see. We want to do a little bit of a demonstration, but before we do that, I'm curious to know, you guys are relationship coaches. I'm sure you're like, yes, that aligns with Imago or this or NVC. What are your thoughts on what we've shared?
Immediately, I have an appreciation for that you've framed how the containers, in that the person who is having the desire to enter into a container is the one who owns the ability for holding the container and person. I think that's really an essential and key, and I don't necessarily see that done. So I can see there's held where it's a little bit more mutual, yeah, or it's something with a need or a concern and they're expecting the other person to hold them. And I really like how this one is set up.
Thank you so much. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I noticed that as well, and I also very similarly that setting the stage part where so much thought is put into basically giving the conversation its best chance at being successful. I think that's super critical. It's kind of like entering into a psychedelic experience where anyone who's like looked into like how to have a good trip, it's all about set and setting. So yeah, this is very much about doing the same thing. I really appreciate that. And I like that to that sequence, the S.P.A.R.C. sequence, it gives people a handle, to, or I don't know, some kind of a ladder of rungs to grab onto as they're going through the process. Where, I know that that's present in various formats, but after a while of practicing using NVC and other formats, it becomes sort of after a while, hopefully, to the degree that we're really embodying an unconscious competency, we don't have to think as much about what we're doing. But if I can imagine if I were to even unconscious competency where I didn't have to think about it, if I had that 5 stages to register, that would probably serve to tie together some loose ends and in certain parts of the process. Cool.
Thank you, Jason. I wanted to add something to that. First, thank you so much for seeing us and the work we're doing with this. And this is definitely a work in progress. And as you can see, we're always adding things. One of the things that I want to mention in regards to the order of things is that the nice thing about it is that you can always reset, right? Like if you get to a point where you're getting lost in the sauce, so to speak, go back to setting the stage. Go back to building rapport again with your partner. Sorry, there's an annoying fly for some reason. And one of the things I forgot to mention in setting the stage is like co-regulating with touch, right? Like so often I find that we get in our heads, and we get lost and we lose our steps or the rungs on the ladder. And then what we can do is just like, can we just slow down and just hold each other and just breathe and just do a simple box breath together, and then go back to the probing and acknowledging. So you can like kind of go up the rungs of the ladder and then come back down and set the foundation again, and then keep going back up. So that's something that I think is useful as well. So I think what we want to do is kind of like demonstrate S.P.A.R.C. I want to make sure the sound is good. So let us know if you can hear us, because we're going to be like probably like facing each other a little bit more. Have you chosen who you want to be?
I actually liked the scenario you were talking about just now.
Which is?
You're talking to someone new. I feel like that would be relevant.
Okay.
To them.
All right.
If we wanted to do the same gender.
Same gender. Mm-hmm. Okay, but what I'm thinking is that we wanted to demonstrate their circumstance, and we can make things up. We can role play, make things up, so that they can feel like we've captured their experience, but we're playing with it.
You check.
That was my original intent. You were thinking that we could demo our thing.
No, it sounded like something
similar. Okay.
Similar, but
all right. So who do we want to play? Do you want to play? I want to hold the container.
So I actually think it does both go. Yeah. I don't think the person coming to someone with an omen is the only person responsible for holding the container, because you might be really triggered when you're in that space, mm-hmm. and you're looking for help from the other partner. So I do think it can go a couple different ways. If you want, I can come to you as Jason, where he said like he'll see something and feels elevated and he does his own work, and then he comes to the conversation. But I'm looking to you to hold the space, maybe.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty resolved that I want to be Jason, because I think it simplifies things from a visual perspective, from a teaching perspective. Okay. And I want you to be Hannah, and I want you to maybe take us to a place where, you have been in a sensual container, a loving communal container, and there was a man that you want to pursue further with. It's kind of funny because it's similar to what's happening in our life right now.
Yeah, that's why we can pull from that.
And then, but you're upset because I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that. This is okay. where the block is, where the rub is. I'm just not ready for it. So okay. Why don't we practice? Let's just play with it, and we'll use S.P.A.R.C. All right, guys, have fun watching.
And don't be offended. We're doing our best.
If we screwed up,
Okay.
There's no judgment. I swear.
try to log off.
Ready to and listening.
All right, so there's no phones, and we have a container, and it's just you and me.
Mhm.
Can I hold you?
Sure.
So,
What's on your mind?
well, I've observed that you're charged, and I just want to talk through it. Thank you for allowing this container. You already know this, but I know that every time we use this method and we go through all the steps, we figure things out. So whatever it is that comes out, I just trust it. I trust that it will end somewhere good. And I also want you to know that I'm just so grateful that we've been through so much, and here we are 3.5 years later, like madly and deeply in love. It feels like every day we're just getting stronger and stronger. I'm just grateful for that.
That's good.
I love you. So, yeah, I see that you've been in contact with someone that we had a communal experience with, and I observe some updates about possibly elevating your relationship with this person, and I just call him Brian for now.
Yep.
So, so I observed this happening with you and Brian, and I don't know what I don't know about the future. So I'm not going to attach myself to any judgments or meanings or scarcity thoughts, but I do feel some discomfort. I don't know if it belongs here. My only need is a need for clarity, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are about all of this.
Well, thank you for sharing. Do you feel complete? Is there anything else?
I just want to know what you're seeing, thinking, and feeling and needing.
Sure. Thank you for asking. So, first of all, I appreciate you sharing that. I realize it's an update, and any kind of news or change can always trigger emotions and questions about the future. I mean,
I apologize. I just realized that I'm not fully expressed.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow. I just realized that I don't feel ready. I'm just, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just trauma. I don't know if it's something from the past, but I also wanted to mention that I don't feel ready
Okay.
for you to escalate your relationship with somebody else like that.
Okay. Well, I guess, what I'm observing when you share that with me is I observe you sharing that you don't feel ready. I mean, obviously, I'm shelving what kind of meanings I have right now.
I want you to just tell me everything. Like, what are you seeing?
Okay.
What are you really, truly thinking and
Gotcha.
feeling? Like,
Okay. Well, I mean, the meaning I'm creating is that there's a lack of freedom for me, and that there might be a shadow or a piece of work that feels uncomfortable for you to move towards and explore. And there's a desire, maybe, these are meetings, I recognize, there's a desire maybe to walk away from the work and stay comfortable rather than work with me on that. So, I mean, the emotions I have are, there's a certain level of, I mean, I have empathy for you, I have understanding, and a bit of frustration, maybe impatience. I've taken a very long time we've taken a very long time getting to know this person, and they show up in a huge way for both of us, for you especially. And you know, I have both of our needs. I have a need for you feeling safe and secure and significant. You're my primary partner. I have no intention to change that. I also have a need for variety and growth and healing and service, and I feel this would allow for that, for both of us, would fill all of those needs. And I guess there's a concern that that might not be met if we don't figure out how to explore this readiness together.
Do you feel like maybe there's a double standard happening at all?
I mean, that's a meaning that I create from a feminine place, so moving past patriarchy, but I don't see you that way. I don't see you as intentionally creating a double standard because you feel I shouldn't be entitled to things that you are. I don't believe that.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you're seeing my reaction to your update. Your meaning is that there's work for me to do, potential work for me to do, and that for us, and that I am not walking towards that work. Is there any resentment, perhaps, that you've done that work and walked towards that work, and perhaps I'm not doing the same work, and maybe you want me to play my part?
I don't feel that resentment simply because you're coming to me to express it. If you were acting out in a really passive-aggressive way for no particular reason and making things really tense, instead of being vulnerable with me the way you are right now, that would probably create resentment because I'd probably be clued into why that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you are being vulnerable and sharing that you don't know why you don't feel ready, I'm ready to explore that with you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that you have this observation, you have a meaning that there's some work for me to do, you have some frustration, and your need is for freedom to explore variety and growth and healing and be in service.
But a huge emotion is empathy.
You have that as well, yeah. So I just want to just acknowledge that I can see how you'd feel that way.
Maybe fear.
And fear too. I can see how you'd feel afraid and frustrated and empathetic all at the same time. And I can see how your need for freedom and growth and safety with me those are all legitimate needs. And I just want you to know that they're legitimate needs. And I want you to know that because I'm madly in love with you, that your needs are mine, that I share those needs. And I want us to just take a few seconds to just breathe into the possibility that your needs and my needs can get met in this. It feels like we're in a good place to look at other observations and other possible meanings. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, I feel ready.
Okay. I think that one thing I'd like to propose is I would like for you to just check in with Brian and just ask him to reach out to me. because I think that while we have a closeness, I feel like stuff's happening between you guys, and that he hasn't checked in with me in a bit. And I feel that would help.
Oh, of course. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
It's easy.
I think that one of our values is to integrate as much as possible. And I can see how
Yes.
because we've already integrated, there's an assumption that it's continual. And if there's a break in that integration and that check-in and that brotherhood and that love, it just makes it harder for me to do the work.
Gotcha. I can completely see why you feel that way, 100%. And that need for continuing showing up and support for you, that is my need for you too.
Thank you. I feel really good. I feel fully expressed. How do you feel?
I feel good. I'm curious, is there anything else other than being a no? Is there anything else that I can do differently? Anything that I have done or not done that you feel hasn't allowed you to feel safe, already secure?
Well, I think that I would like to start off with communication with him.
Okay.
And I would also like to see, if possible, that a first experience would be one where he and I put attention on you together.
I don't know. I'll have to think it over, but okay.
So that's pretty much it, I think.
That is a very reasonable ask.
Yeah.
And I think he'd be completely open to that. I know I am completely open to that. And after you guys talk, I want us to check in and see how you feel.
Okay. Thank you. And I want that to come from you. I don't want it to come from me because I don't want to be in the way.
You're never in the way.
I love you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So I think we have a few people with us. Chrissy, Emily, Maria, Cheryl, Kristen. I'm not sure who's still with us.
She just took her shirt off.
What? But if anybody has any questions before we wrap up this master class, and if you guys have any questions,
what did you guys think about
please, just for those that are viewing, please make sure that you just type your question in and let us know if there's anything on your mind or any comments. Let us know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that was beautiful. And may I speak first? Did you have something? Okay. The thing that really stuck out to me is, well, there's several things did, but something personally relevant stuck out to me, which is that really all of that is deeply dependent on the ability to, regardless of which position one finds themselves in the dialogue, it's dependent on one's ability to really own our internal space, to really not repress it, but stay put, to be fully alive within ourselves without allowing it to inject itself into the conversation through emotion or suggestion or like overt hijack. And that's like a really core capacity that we have to have in order to engage these sorts of conversations, because I saw that as being the thing that made both of you so capable of showing up and functioning in the ways that you did. It's something else that you've really been working on a lot, and that's obvious.
Yeah, thank you. He's a lot better at it than I am. I tend to go into a space where I'm not aware of of myself even anymore.
The beautiful thing about it is that it only takes one person to reel it back in.
Right.
It really just only takes one person. It's if the two people are unraveling, which has happened, by the way. We're far from perfect. We've unraveled, and we've slammed doors, and we've walked out, and we've thrown pillows. So yeah, I think that we're not perfect, but we're getting really better at it, right? We're not letting stuff last, and that's really it's a quality of life thing, right? Like this stuff's gonna bring up a lot of shit, and we want to move through it a little bit faster than feel like miserable every day because stuff's not getting resolved.
When I feel like I'm losing it or I become aware of it, I actually leave to use my physical release tools because I can feel like this groundswell of energy begin to build, and I'm like a volcano. If I catch it, sometimes he's like, "Hey, I can see we're losing our state a little bit," and as long as he feels secure, if I walk out, I feel like if I get that out, I can come back a little bit better resource. That's been working really well for us.
Actually, just last night, she left me.
You can't end there.
And she went to sleep with another woman named Chrissy, who does happen to live in the same house. And I was left alone in bed. And
well, you asked me to.
Yeah. But she left me. And, we had a rupture. We had a rupture that we later cleared. But it's just a matter of, like, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of, like, how do we move through it?
It's not the rupture, it's the repair.
How do we move through it elegantly?
Yeah.
Hannah, did you want to add anything?
Don't have any particular thoughts. I just was felt really immersed in, like, I was relating to what you were saying, obviously, because I personally relate to it. And and I'm inspired. I'm inspired personally by an invitation to be more conscious of how I'm setting a container if I'm coming to Jason with a concern that I'm aware of. And I think this is all just very valuable information, and this whole idea around staying on top of, getting ahead of, staying present with in real time any challenges that arise so they don't fester is a huge aspect of conscious relationship. And I really get this opportunity to learn more about how you guys do that.
Thank you so much.
And I want to recognize Shai, especially what I think made that conversation work was he stayed in a continually vulnerable place. Like, he wasn't afraid to go in and say, I think what I need is this. And I actually realized I didn't mean to sound judgmental of saying, I think you're avoiding work. That actually wasn't how I intended to come out. But in that moment, it might come out that way. But he continued to hold that and just recognize, like, what do I need to become a yes? If I could ask for anything and still be a yes, what would that be? That's really hard to do in that moment.
Secretly, what I was hoping for is, and we didn't plan for this, but I wanted you to be a little bit more irrational and crazy.
Oh,
yeah.
We should have done it last night.
I would have wanted her to, like, really be like, what the fuck? You know how many women you've slept with, and now you're giving me fucking shit
I've moved past
over.
That was me last year.
Over, like, being sensual with a guy. Like, I wanted her to, like, let it all out and, like, really hold that attack and just slowly acknowledging it, breaking it down into what she's seeing, thinking, feeling, and needing, even though it's an attack on me. That's where it gets interesting, right? And we've had those situations.
Let's do that again then at one point. I can bring that up.
She can turn that up. So Jersey Shore. So thank you. I think it's Maria who wrote, "You two are rock stars of communication." Thank you. Thank you guys for joining us. We really are so grateful that you let us, get into your world and poke around a little bit. And it would be fun. If stuff comes up, give us a call. We'll jump right on and do another live.
And we're learning from you guys too. I mean, this
are.
is such a reflective experience. And that's why your input is so valuable. I feel like you've been learned about us in this experience. But the key is that the solution we came to is not necessarily the solution you're going to come to. It's more of that stopping and saying, and I could have said it too, like, if you could have your way, this is another magic line. If you could wave a magic wand and have it your way and be a yes, what would you need from me? Like, these are really powerful words too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys.
Mm-hmm.
You're amazing. Thank you for sharing yourselves with us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing what you're doing.
I'm very much valuing this changes.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right, loves. Make it an awesome rest of your day. Mwah.
Yeah.
There's going to be a delay. Bye, guys.
Ciao, Bellas.
Bye.